Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So there has been some backlash from the situation in Ferguson, Missouri. And yes, I mean, other than the police firing tear gas and rubber bullets and beanbags at both protesters and members of the media, there are finally police officers that are being reprimanded. Believe it or not, police officers are being reprimanded, but they're being reprimanded specifically for things that have happened in Ferguson, Missouri. The story here from Reuters from a couple of days ago actually discusses two police officers who have been reprimanded in Ferguson. The first is a police officer who earned the nickname Officer Go F Yourself because during a situation where some members of the media had somehow snuck in with protesters, they were being told to, you need to go over there. And this guy had his gun pointed at them and told them that he was going to effing kill them. Someone said, "What's your name?" His response was, "Go F yourself." So he earned the nickname Officer Go F Yourself. Well, his name has been released and he has resigned. The story, again, this comes from Reuters. It says a police officer has resigned after pointing a rifle at protesters during racially charged demonstrations in Ferguson, Missouri. What they failed to mention in the opening line here is that it was not just protesters, it was protesters and members of the media. And another officer was fired for inappropriate social media posts stemming from 2 weeks of unrest in Ferguson, according to officials on Friday. Violent protests erupted in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson after police officer Darren Wilson shot and killed 18-year-old Michael Brown on August 9th, drawing global attention to the state of race relations in the United States. Police and demonstrators in Ferguson clashed nightly for days after the shooting, with authorities coming under fire for mass arrest and for using heavy-handed tactics and military gear. At a protest on August 19th, Ray Albers, a police officer in the neighboring community of St. Anne, pointed his rifle at protesters and members of the media that Reuters still conveniently leaves out. And there was a heated verbal exchange, which I relayed briefly at the opening of this story. The episode was caught on video and circulated on social media. St. Anne Police Chief Aaron Jimenez said that Albers, a 20-year veteran of the force, submitted his resignation on Thursday after the municipality's Police Board of Commissioners recommended that he resign due to the incident and because of 3 prior disciplinary actions. Jimenez says they were very lenient because they could have just said he was terminated. Knowing that 20 years counts for something, they asked him to resign. That was a very appropriate decision, says Jimenez. My question here, before I get into the other officer who was reprimanded for things that have happened, my question about Officer Albers is, because he had been on the force for 20 years, do you think that maybe they gave him the chance to resign so that his pension would remain intact? Now, I'm not saying this as some sort of weird conspiracy theory sort of thing, but it's one of those things of, they look out for themselves, they look out for their own, if you will. And from what I know about pensions from government jobs, and I would assume that it's the same in St. Anne in Missouri, is that if you are terminated, you lose the right to your pension. If you resign, you still get your pension. So, just throwing this out as a possibility that maybe because he had been on the force for 20 years, and the chief there says that 20 years counts for something, then they allowed him to resign to keep his pension. The article here from Reuters continues. It says the other officer, Matthew Papert, who worked in the nearby city of Glendale, was fired on Thursday for comments he made on Facebook during the protest. City Administrator Jason Christensen said Papert, who was with the city's police department since 2008, wrote on his Facebook page that he thought the protesters should be, quote, put down like rabid dogs. He also said protesters were a burden on society and a blight on the community. The city launched an internal investigation after officials learned of the post, and according to Christensen, quote, this officer's comments and views were expressed in post are absolutely not the views or opinions of the Glendale Police Department or the city of Glendale. In a statement released by his attorney, Papert said he was deeply remorseful about the Facebook postings and fully recognizes that his words were insensitive and hurtful. I wonder if he only apologized after, well, I know it was after, but if he only apologized because he was reprimanded with termination. Had he gotten, I don't know, one of these 3-day suspensions or, 2-week paid suspension. We're serious. We're going to pay you for 2 weeks to not come work. No, we're serious. Don't come in for 2 weeks, and here's your paycheck. If that was the punishment, if you will, do you think that Papert would have said that he was remorseful about what he did? Or do you think that maybe he's just trying to sort of, save face? Okay, I got fired, but I'm really sorry. And maybe he's hoping that another municipality somewhere will sort of overlook why he was terminated. Well, he said he was deeply remorseful and that he fully recognizes that his words were insensitive and hurtful. I think he means it. Maybe we should give him a job. I don't know. Just saying it's a possibility. And the effects of the Ferguson, Missouri protest are being felt all the way out in California. How, you may ask? Well, there is a news story here from RT.com. That's Russia Today, for those of you playing the home game. The City Council of Davis, California, according to, and they actually link to several sources in here. This is just the source that I prefer to read the article from. They report that the City Council of Davis, California, has decided to drop the local police department's Pentagon-supplied armored vehicle following worries from the community that it could be used against demonstrators, as was the case in Ferguson, Missouri, earlier this month. The Davis City Council adopted a resolution that orders the city to come up with a plan to drop the MRAP, that's the mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle, originally developed for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not originally developed for the drug war or the war on poverty or the war on cancer or the war on people coming to the U.S. from countries that the U.S. officially doesn't like. No. This vehicle that is currently in possession by the Davis, California Police Department and several dozen other police departments and SWAT teams across the country, this vehicle was originally designed for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's more on the vehicle and what the City Council in Davis, California wants to do with it when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. And before I get back to the article here about the city of Davis, California, getting rid of their MRAP, I want to make sure that I tell you about a website that you can go to help fund in a way. You can help fund FPP Radio. That is this show, Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, the daily 5-minute newscast, FPP Radio News, and the weekly news/commentary podcast, the FPP Freedom Minute. You can head over to shop.fppradio.com. There is the Bitcoin store, and I actually noticed during the week when I was adding an item to the Bitcoin shop that it was taking a while to load. And that's because there was some script that I was using on the page. The script is gone, so the Bitcoin store that I operate loads much faster. Now it takes less than half a second to load. Previously, it was taking like 10 or 15 seconds. So it loads much faster. And remember, all Bitcoin orders, and that's the only payment that I accept when you buy direct from me, the Bitcoin orders, you save an extra 5% off, and most of the items have no shipping added, meaning that you're paying retail price and you're saving 5%. You could also shop from Amazon. There's an Amazon payment or an Amazon iframe built into the page, or you can click the little banner and it'll take you to the full Amazon. And remember, when you shop Amazon, all orders over $35 get free shipping. Can also buy or sell some Bitcoin with Coinbase and or ExpressCoin. There's also other places that I have affiliate agreements with. You can find all of those there at shop.fppradio.com. And remember, any purchase that you make from any of my affiliates winds up helping me. You don't have to pay extra. You just need to, make a couple extra clicks on your computer with your mouse to wind up, going through one of my affiliate links. Again, shop.fppradio.com. So back to the article here about the Davis, California City Council voting to get rid of the MRAP. That's the mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle that was originally designed and developed for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and acquired by the city through a government surplus program. And I'm sure you've probably heard about this, the 1033 program, where the Pentagon has these surplus cells, and in some cases that means they just give stuff away to any municipality across the country that request it. And the city of Davis, California requested and received one. Well, now the city council says, we don't want that. You can have it back. The article from RT continues. It says the armored vehicles have been distributed to local law enforcement agencies, especially after the wars wound down and the Pentagon's budget was reduced. And now I could go on about whether or not the Pentagon's budget was actually reduced. Now, the way they do the budget tricks at the federal level is any reduction in an increase is considered a reduction. So, all right, we're going to give you a 5% increase in your budget. Oh, wait, no, we're only going to give you a 3% increase in your budget. The way the feds report that is, we just cut their budget by 2%. No, you increased it by 3%. But because it's 2% less than what was projected, then they consider that a cut. The article continues. It says a large crowd, largely opposed to the city's MRAP, gathered at a city council meeting for the resolution vote. A petition had circulated around town calling for Davis officials to get rid of or repurpose the MRAP. One man attending the meeting was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Tank the Tank," said to the city council, "I would like to say I do not suggest you take this vehicle and send it out of Davis. I demand it. I demand it." Many in Davis are concerned that the military vehicle could be used against political demonstrators or protesters or themselves, as was the case in Ferguson, Missouri, when local law enforcement responded to civil unrest over the police killing of an unarmed teenager with what many saw as a heavy-handed militarized posture. Davis Police Chief Landry Black made the case for keeping the MRAP, saying the police department had confiscated much high-power weaponry in the last year. He said there were specific guidelines for its use and that it is a necessity for the safety of the city. He says, quote, "We enjoy a certain quality of life, but nonetheless, the real world intrudes upon us from time to time." I'm not really sure what he means by that. That, quote, "We enjoy a certain quality of life, but nonetheless, the real world intrudes upon us from time to time." That just makes absolutely no sense when you think about it logically. The quality of a certain quality of life. Well, most people would consider their quality of life to be an effect of reality, not separate from reality or the real world, as he puts it. The real world intrudes upon us. That just, again, it makes absolutely no sense when you think about it logically. The article here continues. It says, one way the U.S. government distributes military-grade weaponry to local police departments is through the U.S. Department of Defense 1033 program, in which the Pentagon offers hundreds of millions of dollars of surplus military equipment to police forces throughout the U.S. For instance, St. Louis County, which encompasses Ferguson, is part of that program. In response to national outrage over the utilization of military weaponry by police in Ferguson, which is emblematic of police forces across the nation, some in Congress have mulled stemming the flow of Pentagon excess to towns across America. Yet powerful police lobbies are mobilizing to beat back any anti-militarization sentiment resulting from scenes and accounts in Ferguson. Meanwhile, close to 200 state and local police departments in the U.S. have lost military-level equipment transferred to them by the Pentagon's 1033 program. You heard me right. 200 state and local police departments have lost equipment that was given to them by the Pentagon. Lost. Gone. They don't know where it is. Did it fall in the wormhole? Who knows? There's a little bit more we'll touch on when we get back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So I'm covering the story, or actually the article here from RT, about the city council in Davis, California, that is deciding, you know what, we don't want this MRAP anymore. That is a mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicle. But apparently, the police lobbies are not happy about the move to demilitarize the local police. And the article here says that nearly 200 state and local police departments have lost military-level equipment transferred to them by the Pentagon's 1033 program. And I will get into that a little bit more here in just a moment. But first, I want to remind you, and it's mentioned in the article here, that Davis, as in the city in California, Davis, California, is home to the University of California, Davis, also called UC Davis, with around 32,000 students. The city's progressive politics are shaped by the university, according to the article. And you may remember that UC Davis was also the site of one of the more shocking moments of the Occupy protest. In November of 2011, a university police officer, Lieutenant John Pike, who some people called Sergeant Pepper, although technically it would be Lieutenant Pepper, he's the guy that just decided to randomly and wantonly pepper spray demonstrators who were sitting peacefully on campus. They weren't doing anything. They were sitting there. They weren't, rioting. They weren't breaking things. They were sitting down on a sidewalk. And Lieutenant John Pike felt that it was not only appropriate, but needed to be done to just randomly pepper spray all of them. And there was a subsequent lawsuit, and Lieutenant Pike requested, I forget how much money he requested as some sort of compensatory damage for pain and suffering of being mocked on the internet and being, ridiculed and punished for violating the rights of the students to protest. But let's discuss the loss of military-grade equipment, shall we? The article, again, this is from RT.com. It says close to 200 state and local police departments in the United States have been suspended for losing military-level equipment transferred to them by the Pentagon. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by suspended. Maybe suspended from the 1033 program, but certainly the police departments have not gone away. The article continues. It says, according to the media outlet Fusion, its independent investigation into the Pentagon's 1033 program, which equips state and local police departments across the U.S. with excess military equipment, turned up an alarming trend. Not only did many law enforcement agencies fail to comply with the program's guidelines, they routinely lost dangerous weaponry. Already, the investigation has found that police departments in Arizona, California, Mississippi, Missouri, Georgia, and others have lost or cannot account for various types of weapons. What sort of weapons, you ask? Well, I have a partial list. M14 and M16 assault rifles. And I don't like the term assault rifle, but that's the term that is used here. What they should have said is fully automatic rifle, but, assault rifle sounds better in the media because that's one of those media buzzwords. It's written here, so that's what I'm reading. These police departments have also lost .45 caliber pistols, shotguns, and even vehicles. How? Now, I can understand if you're one of these people that has, a bunch of land and you parked a broken vehicle with the intent of, oh, yeah, I'm going to go get the parts and fix that. And then things happen and you forget to mow the grass in that section of your property. And then a while later, you're like, didn't I used to have, fill in the blank vehicle? Oh, yeah, it's over there in the weeds. I can understand that because I actually knew a guy that used to have it was a car lot, but it was more for, people would bring junk cars as like a pick and pull sort of thing. And there was one section of the lot that he forgot to mow for a while because he got busy with business. And then all of a sudden, the grass grew up about 4 foot high. He went over, decided to cut it, and found a couple of vehicles. So I can understand a person losing a vehicle. But how does a police department lose a vehicle? Now, when I worked security in the past, we would have checks to where we would have to go through every night at the beginning and the end of the shift and account for all of the vehicles. There were vehicle inspection checks to where you would have to, like check the oil, check this, check that, check the other thing, make sure everything's in proper working order. And you would assume that a police department would have a similar thing. That way they don't wind up misplacing an armored vehicle. But nonetheless, apparently it has happened along with rifles, shotguns, and pistols. The article here continues. It says, so far, 184 state and local departments have reportedly been suspended in a program that involves the participation of more than 8,000 agencies. Since 1990, the 1033 program has administered more than $4.3 billion, with a B, billion, $4.3 billion worth of equipment and weapons. In the wake of heavy police response to protests surrounding the death of the unarmed teenager Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, the topic of police militarization has emerged at the forefront of public debate in the U.S. Police employed heavily armored vehicles, sniper rifles, tear gas, and riot gear as they confronted demonstrators against excessive police force. No irony there, right? You're protesting excessive police force, and what are you met with? Excessive police force. The article continues. It said it sparked widespread concern throughout the country, particularly over the Pentagon's military equipment transfer program. No word in here or in most of the articles, the commentary, the news, etc. that I have seen where they discuss the Department of Homeland Security's grant program that provides military, basically military-grade vehicles. In Keene, New Hampshire, a city of less than 25,000 people, there is a Bearcat. That's a ballistic engineered armored response counterattack truck. Very similarly to the MRAP, it was designed for use in Iraq and Afghanistan, but the Department of Homeland Security, for some reason, decided that it was necessary to give these away to municipalities across the country, and I think the number I have heard is that there are somewhere near 300 Bearcats that have been distributed across the U.S., and all of these come with the sort of asterisk, oh, by the way, this is still property of the Department of Homeland Security, meaning that the Department of Homeland Security can use this at any time for any reason, whenever they decide that they want to. More on the lost weaponry by police and other agencies when we come back. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Now, I'll continue to the article here in just a moment. The article being the study, or rather the investigation that was done and determined that nearly 200 police departments and other agencies across the country have lost, gone, don't know where it is, equipment that was given to them by the Pentagon. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Coinbase. And yes, I know I talk about Coinbase quite a lot, and that's because, in my opinion, they are the best source for having an online Bitcoin wallet that allows you to do merchant services. That is the payment processor that I use for Bitcoin payments that I accept at shop.fppradio.com. And people always ask, well, is it insured? What happens if my money gets stolen? Well, until now, the question was, well, just make sure your Bitcoins don't get stolen. Coinbase, their website is secure. They use, super enhanced encryption that I can't even fathom to understand. But just a couple of days ago, they announced that they now have insurance on deposits. The blog from their website, blog.coinbase.com, says, quote, "We're proud to publicly announce that Coinbase holds insurance against theft or loss of its Bitcoin. We've been insured for almost a year, but given the recent claims of insurance in the industry, we thought it was appropriate to tell our users about it. Our users, of course, won't be charged for the insurance," meaning they're providing you insurance for free. The insurance, you might be wondering, what does the insurance cover? The insurance covers losses due to breaches in physical or cybersecurity, accidental loss, and employee theft. It does not cover Bitcoin lost or stolen as a result of a user's negligence to maintain secure control over their login credentials, meaning that if you leave your password lying around and someone hacks into your account, well, technically that would not be hacking into your account if you basically hand them the login credentials. So you would not be protected against that. But if someone hacks into your email account and then from there resets your password to Coinbase and then steals your money, you would be protected. As I understand what they're saying here, you would be protected from that. So Coinbase, this is just one more reason to trust Coinbase. You can get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. And if you do sign up for Coinbase, make sure you go through coinbase.fppradio.com. That way I get a referral credit for sending Coinbase a new customer. Again, that's coinbase.fppradio.com. So back to the article here from RT. It says, although the Pentagon stated the program in question here being the 1033 program, where the Pentagon distributes surplus equipment, being, surplus as in extra M14s, M16s, 45 caliber pistols, shotguns, and even military-grade vehicles. The Pentagon says that program is meant to, quote, enhance public safety and improve homeland security. Critics argue that the inability of police to keep track of their equipment adds another layer of doubt to the idea that security is being improved. Tim Lynch of the Cato Institute's Project on Criminal Justice told Fusion, quote, the case for giving military weaponry to these small police departments was already thin in the beginning. Now that we're finding that there is insufficient accountability for tracking this equipment, then the case is beginning to fall apart, end quote. In at least 2 cases, Humvees were reported missing. In Georgia, the Humvee was reportedly sold somehow, only to be recovered later and moved to a different department. Another case in Arkansas involved a stolen Humvee that was not reported stolen until a day later. Firearms were routinely lost or misplaced. In Arizona alone, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department lost 11 or 12 weapons. 11 or 12, we're not really sure. Somewhere around a dozen. And for those of you keeping track, yes, Maricopa County, that's Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the guy that's supposed to be getting tough on crime and, making sure that people don't want to go back to jail. Yeah, Sheriff Joe lost 11 or 12 weapons that were given to him for free by the Pentagon. The article continues. Lynch added, quote, the program is obviously very sloppy, and it's another reason that Congress needs to revisit this promptly. We don't know where these weapons are going, whether they are really lost or whether there is corruption involved. And Lynch brings up a good point here, something that I did not even think about is that maybe these things are being given to some of the people on the police force, and then, sorry, we lost it, don't know. Or maybe these things actually are being lost, and by lost, I mean stolen by members of the police department. Either way, with the apparent lack of accountability, maybe the program should be scrapped altogether. And if you are a reader of my website, fpp.cc, then you might recall that the article that I published last week, and it will be in the newspaper that gets printed later this week. The article was titled, "Police Should Not Have What Can't Be Bought on the Open Market." So I would dare say that unless I can buy an MRAP or a Bearcat, and right now I can't buy a Bearcat because Lenco, the company that makes Bearcats, will only sell to authorized government entities and authorized law enforcement. So you are prohibited from buying a Bearcat. And I believe the same could be said about the MRAPs and some of the other things that are being given away by the Pentagon to these police departments that then just wind up missing. The article concludes here. It says, as previously reported by RT, questions over the Pentagon program have reached President Obama as well, and he recently ordered a review of the entire operation. Though we don't know how deep the probe will go, we don't know if it's only going to be of the 1033 program, or if he is also going to order an investigation into the Department of Homeland Security's grant program that gives away Bearcats. We don't really know. And one more thing that I want to mention here in this first hour, I had mentioned when talking about Lieutenant Pike, that being the police officer from the UC Davis police force, who is the guy that was pepper spraying people. Well, apparently he received a workers' compensation settlement totaling $38,059. The article I'll just read real quick. It says, assaulting peaceful protesters with pepper spray can be awfully stressful, and John Pike certainly knows it better than most. A judge awarded him $38,000 and says that the settlement, a workers' compensation settlement between UC Davis and Pike, or rather the agreement was between UC Davis and Pike is a former Marine turned campus law enforcement lieutenant, according to Yolo County's Davis Enterprise newspaper. The settlement was something that happened in 2013. So 2 years after he pepper sprayed some people who are just sitting on the sidewalk, he was given $38,000 for a workers' compensation settlement because of pain and suffering and, I guess, undue stress. Says here in the article, Pike faced, quote, continuing and significant internal and external stress with respect to resolving and solving the significant emotional upheavals that have occurred in his life. The judge determined that the office had not shown evidence of substantial improvement more than a year after the incident began to unfold. So there you have it. You assault people, and then you claim that it's stressful dealing with the stress. It's just too much stress. I can't deal with it anymore. And then a judge gives you $38,000, which is but a measly amount compared to the $121,000 he was making before. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorcFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. This is hour number 2. That means it's interview hour. My guest this week is none other than Mr. Cody O'Connor, the host of Off the Air Live, and probably one of the luckiest guys in the Liberty movement that I know of. And if you've ever seen his girlfriend, you will understand why I'm saying that. Cody, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome, and I'm glad that's the thing I can be known for. Oh, yeah, he's the guy in the Liberty movement with the attractive girlfriend.
Yeah.
We'll get to all of his opinions later, but wow, let's focus on her.
Well, you know, it's so rare. There's not a lot of guys that are, libertarians that have really attractive girlfriends.
Yep. Well, here's what I can say. I didn't do it the way I should have done it. I was mostly lucky. I want everybody to know that. It took a lot of persistence. I hung around. I asked over and over again, you want to go out with me? And eventually, I think she just broke down and was just like, okay, fine. I don't want to give anybody the impression that it was easy for me.
So, Cody, for people that might not be familiar with who you are, can you give a better introduction of yourself than I just gave?
Yep, I can try and do that. So, okay, I've been doing this whole radio thing for quite a while. I started podcasting back in 2007. Back in January of 2007, I started doing something, the Cody O'Connor Show. And what that was I was blogging for a couple years before that. And it was one of my high school teachers who actually told me, you know what, I think it's cool that you're political at such a young age. I'm not going to read your blog, though. Everybody's got a blog. Now, if you get a podcast, then I'll start thinking about that. So I basically took that advice and ran with it. And this was back in a time where there weren't a lot of other libertarian shows out there. So I didn't even have to be good to get a, generous following. It was myself, Stefan Molyneux, who we contractually have to mention once an hour on LRN.FM, I hear. Free Talk Live.
I almost never mention Stefan, so I if there is a contract, 1, I never saw it, 2, I never signed it, and 3, I'm definitely in violation of it.
Yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you there. Oop, hold on a second. I do have board issues that are ongoing lately, so bear with me.
Certainly. And while you were taking care of the board issues, I will just mention, you had said Free Talk Live, and Free Talk Live, they've been around for about a dozen years now, and they're one of the few Liberty programs that one can actually hear on terrestrial radio. And by terrestrial radio, I mean, like if you're driving in your car and you have your radio set to certain stations, there's about 165 of them now across the country that you can tune into Free Talk Live. And the other Liberty show that I am aware of that is on terrestrial radio would be the Freedom Fiends. And if you are listening to this show on LRN.FM, they air just before this show. So the Fiends actually lead into Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on LRN. There are other outlets where you can hear this show, and I've got all of those linked there at fppradio.com. Cody, are your technical issues taken care of there?
Yeah, I think I sound better now.
Okay.
So where was I? Back to the origins of the radio show. Okay,
yeah, so in 2007, you started podcasting because one of your high school teachers says, I'm not going to read your blog, but if you start saying stuff and posting that, then I'll listen to what you say.
Exactly, and I did that for a couple of years, and it was actually pretty successful. I stopped after about 100 episodes, took a break, I decided I wanted to take a break from radio and get back into music and drumming. So I did that for a little while. I came back and I kind of rebooted my podcast career. And I think it was around late 2008 where I decided to start Off the Air Live, which actually initially started out as just a comedy show. Because I'm one of these people that, Darryl, I can get so burnt out with politics. I'm the first one, like I say something once and then I don't even want to say it again. I don't even want to have to repeat myself. So I just got so burnt out that I had to take a break. And then after a little while, I realized that, I was doing my comedy show, but every once in a while, I'd end up getting into a political topic and I was sort of like, one, I kind of miss this. And two, I don't know how many other shows are out there doing what I could do, which is this niche sort of libertarian comedy type of podcast. Now, there are some out there nowadays, Puke in the Game being one of them, but at the time, there wasn't any that I had known about. And I really got to give a huge bunch of credit to Ian for giving me an opportunity to put my show on LRN.FM. It was a shot in the dark for me. This was back in my time where I was way less professional. I was swearing way more, and it was barely even anything coherent. Mostly fart jokes, and he went with it. I have to say that a lot of that has to do with the fact that I work at WGAN, and for a little while they were carrying Free Talk Live on Saturdays. So Ian actually ended up calling my program director, and he put in a good word for me, which I think is what helped seal the deal for me getting on LRN.FM with a live program. Otherwise, I think you would have just saw that email and just ignored it forever, which I wouldn't blame him for.
Yeah, Ian does get a lot of emails, so, if it was something that slipped through the cracks, I would say that it slipped through the cracks, not that he necessarily ignored it, but that is kind of interesting of how you sort of came about from doing this obscure podcast to actually having that be still kind of a podcast on an internet radio station, probably the biggest and most well-known libertarian internet radio station. But, you're still kind of doing a podcast. You just happen to do it live.
Yeah, I mean, for a while I was using Ustream like a lot of people do. But, there's something special, I think, about having an actual network. And I hear from people all over the place, podcasters who would always say, oh, I really want to set up a network where it's just like 24-hour streaming of like live programs that people are just listening to all day. And everybody talks a good game, but the only network that I've really seen that has put it to good use and is really close to having live content just about all day is LRN.FM. So it's a huge honor to be a part of this network. Everything else it's just either nonsense or low quality crap that I can't even listen to, like blog talk radio type quality.
Oh, yeah, that annoys me. It was when somebody's like, oh, yeah, I've got a radio show. It's on Blog Talk Radio. No, that's not a radio show. You talk into a telephone. And
yeah,
the quality, I must admit, the quality has gotten slightly better over the last couple of years, but it's not the same as, actually being on an internet radio network.
Right. And I have to say also that I'm really proud of how many shows we're starting to get now that are coming out to be very professional sounding. For a time being, it was just Free Talk Live, but now we're seeing Freedom Fiends is really coming together. I'm still just vulgar as hell, but, I can kind of be professional and at least have a good sounding quality thing because, Michael Dean will tell you this. If your show doesn't sound good, it doesn't matter what you have to say. It's got to be easy on the ears.
Yes.
Just like you're way more apt to listen to what a hot girl has to say than somebody who just doesn't look that good. Otherwise, it's you know what I mean? It's just going to be more of an uphill battle. If your quality in the studio sounds better, then automatically people are going to be more likely to want to listen to you.
Well, and they're also going to listen a little more intently instead of just hearing what is being said of, there's background noise that, sounds very crisp. They're actually going to listen to what is being said because they're going to automatically assume that you are more professional than something that sounds like it was recorded with 2 tin cans held together by pieces of string. And Cody, we'll be right back. We do have to take the trip to the market, but just wanted to mention that you can find this show on iHeartRadio along with Peace News Now by Derek J, Free Talk Live, and the Angel Clark Show. All very good, very well-produced Liberty programming. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. My guest is Cody O'Connor, host of Off the Air Live, which can actually be heard twice a week on Thursday nights and Saturday nights on LRN.FM. That's the Liberty Radio Network. And Cody, you said that you've been doing this off and on for about 7 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So you started when you were in high school in 07, took a little bit of a break, started it back up in 08, and then, what was it, about a year and a half ago when you started on LRN?
Yeah, I think it'll be around October or so where it'll be my 2-year anniversary on LRN, because I remembered it was right around election season when I started, so I had a fun time those first few months.
Oh, I'm sure you did, because, you know, the jokes just write themselves about politicians. So, you know, comedy when you're making fun of politicians, it's fairly easy. And that's one reason that, you know, I try not to do the lowbrow humor on my show. I try to, you know, be a little bit higher caliber as far as what I discuss, but at the same time, I do discuss things that I could very easily make jokes about. Like, you know, earlier today I was talking about the police officer out in Davis, California, the guy that they called Sergeant Pepper, Lieutenant John Pike, the guy that was just pepper spraying people. I could make all kinds of jokes about, you know, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, whatever. But that's not what I do. But I completely understand why you bring humor to it, because if you don't laugh about things, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
That's exactly it. I mean, see, that's the reason why I got burnt out that first run, is that it wasn't a fun show. I had on people that I would argue with all the time, because the whole idea of the show initially was I debate a liberal and a conservative. Well, that gets old after a while.
That would drive me crazy.
Exactly. So eventually I had to give that up and realize that, listen, if I can't laugh at this, then it's not worth doing. I will drive myself crazy. It's the only way to do it. And further, I really think the market is tapped as far as angry liberty people on the internet. There's plenty of that. You know, by me throwing my hat in the ring as far as doing that, I'm not going to be adding anything. I can't yell louder than Cantwell. You know, I can try, but I don't think I can do it.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me that there are liberty people on the internet that are angry?
Yeah, I know. I don't know where you've been, man, but it's rampant.
It just seems, you know, like far-fetched. Like, that would never happen. Like, a police officer would never just randomly shoot an unarmed teenager. That stuff never happens.
Right. And then, you know, you never see people getting angry about that stuff.
Yeah.
It's all jokes and fun.
Yeah. So, one thing that I'm curious about, you said that you started this when you were in high school. So as a teenager, what got you politically curious?
This is a fun story. So the thing that actually got me political was my friend lent me this book by Michael Savage called Liberalism is a Mental Disorder. That was my starting point. And I think I'm lucky that I was introduced into politics probably at the age of like 15 or 16, because otherwise, if I later on read that book, I probably would have been screwed for the rest of my life. I had enough time on my hands to think about my opinions a little bit more critically, because, you know, the difference between if you're getting into politics as a kid, you have so much free time to go on the internet and question yourself and all of that nonsense. When you're an adult and you have jobs and you have kids and you have a wife to attend to and you vote every 4 years, yeah, you read the paper sometimes, you turn on NPR or whatever you do, and that just creates what you think your political belief is. But I'm of the belief that probably literally like 90% of people, they just say things that they heard someone else say. And I was lucky enough to, I blogged for probably 2 years before getting into podcasting. And I was lucky enough to go back and read stuff that I wrote and say, you know what? Maybe I don't need to care so much about what the gays are doing and whether or not they get married. Hey, you know what? Maybe Abu Ghraib is not the best thing we could do for our image around the world. Yeah, maybe the border doesn't need to exist. That seems like an imaginary line. And it was just like point after point of reevaluating opinions. And it was a very slow process where I went from being just a straight up conservative to a neo-libertarian, which is a pro-war libertarian. Try and make sense of that, but I tried to.
Okay, hold on. Let me pause you real quick because yeah. I'm still trying to wrap my head around. You read a Michael Savage book, and not the fact that you read a Michael Savage book. That's not the confusing part. The confusing part is how after reading the Michael Savage book, you decided, and the book being Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, how you then decided after reading that book that borders shouldn't exist, that Abu Ghraib was not a good idea, and that maybe gay people should be left alone.
Oh, trust me, all of those opinions came way later. It took me a long time because after I read that book, I became privy to the world of talk radio, so I became obsessed with it. I would listen to Savage every day, Laura Ingraham, Hannity. I would hang out in the basement listening to radio. As a kid, it was the worst thing ever. So I became incredibly indoctrinated and thought that my opinions were my own. And it took a long process of self-discovery to realize that deep down I did not care about those things. And it was almost like, escaping from a cult in a sort of way. I had to reprogram my brain and allow, people like Ron Paul to, reach his hand out and save me from all of that nonsense. But it was a very, very long process.
And one thing that made your process a whole lot easier than my process and people that are a little older than me is you had this wonderful technology available at your fingertips called the Internet. When I think it was my senior year of high school, they had this thing in my library. They brought like all of the classes through the library, and they said, we've got this new thing called the Internet, and you can use this to look up and try and figure out what book you want to read. And I'm like, why should I use this Internet thing? I know how the card catalog works.
Right. Well, I bet that's what the librarians told you, too. They're very anti-Internet. Anytime you talk to a librarian, well, you go on Wikipedia, anybody can make up anything. And yet, for some reason, it seems to be a resource that I can most of the time trust. I think they're just trying to protect their jobs, Darryl.
I don't know, but... at the time, like, Wikipedia did not exist. There was still Netscape Navigator, and I don't know anybody that's used Netscape Navigator in 15 years or more, but the way it was described of, you can look up information, I'm like, yeah, there's an encyclopedia on the shelf. I can go look up information over there. But now it is so easy to find all the world's information at the tip of your fingertips. And what do? We look at cats and porn. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. We'll get back to Cody O'Connor in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Roberts and Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Since 1977, to be exact, Roberts and Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They now take Bitcoin for purchasing precious metals, so you can turn some of your profits into a long-term investment. Call Roberts and Roberts Brokerage for knowledgeable advice on investing. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. And when you call and you talk to the lovely Megan, make sure that you let her know that Darryl sent you their way. Now, back to Cody. And Cody, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the reading a Michael Savage book and then deciding that you wanted to think for yourself. Because one of the things, and I used to listen to Michael Savage, not because I necessarily agreed with everything that he said, but because I found him to be entertaining.
Oh, he is, definitely.
And one of the things that he would always sort of, project was, I have the right ideas. Like, if you disagree with me, you're wrong, you're, a liberal, and you have a mental disorder. And it was like, wow, okay, like, this doesn't really encourage people to think for themselves, being told that, you're wrong and there's something wrong with your brain.
Yeah, it's so weird how far I've come, and I've literally at this point brought myself to this place where I've separated my beliefs so far from my ego where I don't even mind if somebody proves me wrong today. I'll change my mind. I'm not, like, stuck to my ideas. And maybe that's something that kind of helped me move my way through. But I've gone all the way around the political gambit, and let me tell you, I'm getting into some weird stuff on the show lately that I never thought would happen. For a long time, I was a hardcore atheist. Mostly just because I never went to church as a kid. And, when you're exposed to religion later on in life and someone throws a Bible at you, you're like, what is this crap? You're kidding me. But, for whatever reason, I've latched on to all of these new age things and Buddhism, spiritual science, all of this stuff. And I love talking about it on the show. Anytime I take a psychedelic drug, I'm giving a full, hour-long talk about what I experienced. And it's another one of those things that I feel separate what I do from other shows, and that I don't stick to just politics, because I think there's a human element to, one, the way we structure ourselves in society, but two, that's just life in general. It's not just politics, it's culture, it is religion, it is, just everything around us. And there's a lot of crap that if you're not paying attention to, you won't realize that it's screwing with people's brains. Just for example, last week on the show, I subjected myself to watching the VMAs just to see what was going on.
Okay.
Last year, Miley Cyrus humped a teddy bear, so I was like...
hold on. Let's talk about that real quick. Yeah. Because I remember right after the VMAs... seeing, because I don't have cable, I've not had cable that I've paid for in years. That doesn't mean that I have stolen cable, but there have been a couple of places that I've rented where, cable was included in the rent. But I have not intentionally paid for cable in several years. So I did not watch the VMAs live. But the day after last year's VMAs, it was all over Facebook. Oh, I can't believe what Miley Cyrus did. It was so provocative. And I watched the entire thing, and I'm thinking, okay, so where's the provocative stuff? Like, I saw Madonna do all of this 20-some-odd years ago. So I didn't see the provocative stuff that Miley was doing, and then it was like, did you not notice her wiggle her butt and do this and that? And I was like, oh, that was the provocative stuff?
Yeah.
So what was the provocative stuff this year?
Well, first of all, Darryl, I'm convinced everybody's getting butt and hip implants. That's the new thing this year. Maybe I haven't been paying attention, but the butts are very hypnotic. and literally everything is hypnotic. And that was where I got more weirded out because I don't want people to think I'm a prude. My whole thing on this is that I'm not offended by anybody wiggling a butt. Trust me. The thing is, though, is that TV should be TV and porn should be porn. Like, we already have that. Let's have TV be a little bit better than that. What weirded me out this year is that I felt like right off the bat, now I only watched like 25 minutes because that's all I could handle, but I felt like there was a lot of weird subliminal stuff going on that really just like screamed out at me like, this is crazy. So it started out with like a 20-minute long Beyonce medley where in the backdrop, you know, she was singing, but in the backdrop there were all these like psychedelic kaleidoscope things going on. And then there was like a faded head of her, like she looked sort of like the Wizard of Oz. And the only thing I can compare it to is a video I've seen online from Timothy Leary called How to Program Your Brain, which you're actually meant to watch while tripping on acid. That's all I could think. So in my brain, all I was thinking was, you know, what are they trying to get our brains ready for? The next thing that happens is there's blinking strobe lights. I don't know how that's affecting me. Alex Jones tell me flicker rates does something to my brain. Then there was a backdrop of babies, happy babies giggling. So I figured that was to try and get us to let our guard down. And Darryl, the next thing that happens once my guard was let down was out comes Nicki Minaj from an alien spaceship in the shape of an Illuminati triangle pyramid, sent down from a spaceship UFO made out of 666s. And then also out comes a whole bunch of sexy dancing Anunnaki reptilians. And I didn't know what to think at that point. I was just bracing myself for Satan to come out during the next act and just start shaking his booty too. It was bizarre.
Okay, so what did you do with Cody O'Connor, and why does it seem like I'm talking to Mark Dice?
Well, I actually I played some Mark Dice audio on the show to make fun of him. I want to be very clear that Mark Dice is crazy, and I am nothing like him. I don't use alliteration like crazy. And I actually think Mark Dice is part of the Illuminati because I think he actually makes people more turned off to the idea of an Illuminati existing than he convinces people that it exists. I just think that with that many people watching the VMAs, it does seem weird to me that this is like a major cultural thing. And I don't know if the intention is to program minds or just to, you know, get people to watch by, you know, showing some butts. But
maybe they're showing the butts to get you to watch, and then they program your mind. I don't know. But here's my thoughts on it, and I've had a similar thought for years. Is this: symbols only have power if you think they do. So, like, there are some people that, you know, like every triangle. Oh, Illuminati! Like, that was placed there intentionally to remind you that the Illuminati exist. Or every black and white checkerboard tile floor. See, that's put there to remind you that the Masons run the world. No, maybe somebody just really likes black and white checkerboard floors. Maybe somebody just likes triangles. I like owls. That doesn't mean that I worship the devil.
The somebodies who designed Washington, D.C. really like pentagram-shaped street structures. I don't know why, but that somebody really does. No, here's the thing, man. All it boils down to for me is that...
Hold your thought, Cody. We're at the end of the segment, and I don't want you getting cut off mid-sentence here. So we'll come back. Symbolism. Does it only have power if you think it does, or is every triangle really some subliminal thing to remind you that the Illuminati controls the world? Stay tuned. Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Cody O'Connor is my guest, and we've been talking about, well, pretty much everything, but in the last segment, we got off onto the VMAs, that's the Video Music Awards, and some of the symbolism. And I'm not going to deny that there's not some weird symbolic things that are thrown out there. I just think that people wind up giving too much power to the symbol. Of every time they see a triangle, they think that it's somehow intentionally put there as a reminder that the Illuminati controls the world. Or every time that there's, a black and white checkerboard floor, or, go into a grocery store, and a lot of times because it's, aesthetically pleasing to the eye in the like meat department or the seafood area, they'll have the black and white checkerboard and then stuff sitting on that because it looks good to the eye. It's visually appealing. People think that that means that, oh yeah, this is a reminder that the Masons control the world. And Cody, you were beginning to give your thoughts on symbolism and whether symbols only have power because people think they do, or symbols are all-powerful even if people think that it's just, hey, maybe that's a triangle.
Well, here's where I was trying to go in this direction, and I didn't want to dig myself into the hole of going into the conspiracy territory. But I don't think it's necessarily just symbolism, but music in general and culture in general kind of have this thing that they perpetuate, and what that is a behavior that most people take in and become their personality type, and that's sort of what I've been paying attention to lately, and what I've been zoning in on and focusing on and trying to study like it's a species. And what I've noticed lately, and I think this has to do with the culture, so the VMAs is sort of to blame, is that almost everybody is obsessed with this idea of being famous, of being a pop star, a rap artist. It's getting ridiculous. Everybody is on Instagram posting these narcissistic selfies, and everything becomes this obsession with accessorizing yourself and, going to the tanning salon and burning your skin so you can look good. And what that does is it distracts you from everything that is actual reality, because the more time you spend trying to look cool by spending $20 on a pair of socks that are covered in weed logos, or, a nice hat that you wear backwards, just slightly on the top of your head, the more time and money that you focus on those things, the more distracted you are from the real issues. Those type of people that you see at the mall and you go, oh God, look at him. He's not paying attention to whether or not, ISIS was actually funded by the American government. He's not paying attention to any of the going-ons in Ferguson. He could give a crap. He just wants to get his ding-a-ling played with, if I can be so crude. And if we want to bring it into this conspiracy territory, you could at least make the argument that the government benefits by having this much garbage put out over the TV and the radio and everything else, because it keeps people completely wrapped up in sports and what people were wearing on the red carpet, and they don't have time to know or care about the stuff that's actually affects them, like, I don't know, fractional reserve banking or something, the real stuff that isn't as fun or sexy.
Right, but at the same time, one can look back through history, and they can see that during 1066, when William the Conqueror went across the English Channel, people were too busy, tending to their fields and trying to keep the local lord of whatever lands from just saying, nope, you can't live on this land anymore because you didn't give me enough stuff. They were too busy with that to fend off, this invading army. So there have always throughout history been things that have distracted people from, sort of paying attention to those who would be their oppressors. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's, modern culture. I would just say that that's how society and civilization has been for pretty much all of human history.
Okay. What's interesting, though, is that I think we're living in a time right now where we have such an amazing opportunity with the internet, and it could go either really good or really badly. This is another thing that I like to talk about a lot all the time, because it's such an amazing tool to connect us and share ideas. It's sort of like this digital collective consciousness that we've created where we can tap into it and communicate with people from around the world instantaneously. We can send out, a tweet and it reached thousands of people to set up, events, protests, rallies, whatever. I mean, that can be the tool used to change the paradigm. The problem is that it's way easier to dump buckets of ice on your head. It's way easier to look at cat pictures, way easier to watch porn. So it's like, back in the day, yeah, we didn't have those tools to learn the truth about, how the people in charge of us weren't as good as we thought they were. You just learn what you were told. But now it's like you have access to information that is decentralized and doesn't go through a filter. There's no gatekeeper. You have the opportunity to access that information that will open your mind up. But the problem is that a lot of the people aren't looking for that. They're too busy looking to, again, get their ding-a-ling played with. And that boils down basically the problem with us right now.
Right. And I would completely agree with that people, no matter what. And yeah, I've, just picked up this little device that Michael Dean calls a chromed robot turd, and I could access the entirety of human knowledge at my fingertips. And what do I do with this most of the time? Well, aside from, like, what time is it? And, using this as a watch, I'm posting on Facebook with this little chromed robot turd. And, that says a lot because, I do a lot of media. I make a lot of media to, try to get people to think about things like, hey, maybe, the local police department should not have this mine-resistant vehicle. Like, I'm not sure about where you live, but in Keene, New Hampshire, there's never been mines just randomly placed in the middle of the street. So, why do we need a mine-resistant vehicle? It's because of Pumpkin Fest. Terrorists might blow up Pumpkin Fest. And, yes, that's actually what they put in the application for the grant to the Department of Homeland Security was Pumpkin Fest is a potential terrorist target.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it is. But here's the thing, man, is you're using social media the way it's supposed to be used. I actually read an article just the other day that says the majority of people who use social media self-censor themselves. So the two things that they won't talk about are religion and politics. And in my opinion, those are the two things that matter the most.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to solve any of the world's problems by talking about the weather. It's just not going to happen. And I'm sorry that, yes, some people aren't going to like it. Some people are going to get mad. Some people are going to block you. But it's stuff that's going to have to be brought up at some point. So at least you're using social media in the way it's supposed to be used. I do that a lot too. I try and tell jokes that also enlighten people, which is better than what I used to do. I used to, when I would get bored, I would pull out my iPhone and play Angry Birds, which thinking back on it now, there is nothing about that game that brought me enjoyment. I was only mad. So it's not like I'm passing the time with a smile on my face. I was only ruining my day. That game I think the game's evil.
It probably is, and there's probably, I'm sure that somebody has gone through the game and pointed out all of the Illuminati symbolism that is hidden in the game. The bird represents something, and the pig. I played it once and had no clue what I was doing and was like, why is this a thing? But apparently it's really popular, and a lot of people get really addictive to it, or addicted. I don't really know how you get addicted to a video game, but apparently some people claim that they do.
I think it's like drugs. People like it better than real life. That's all it is.
I could see getting infatuated with playing a video game, but, you're not going to have physical withdrawals. Oh, man, I've not played, Storm Cell 5 in, 4 days. I'm really tweaking over here.
Get my fix, man. Where's my DS? Who's seen my DS, man? I need it.
Yeah, but it is important to, you can't constantly focus on things that are going to, make you think. You have to relax. And that's one thing that I think Cody tries to do with Off the Air Live. I do it every now and then. Yes, I watch wrestling and I watch football. Get over it. I do a lot of stuff. I need to relax. Stay tuned, or not stay tuned. You can find it online at fppradio.com. Until next week.